Okay friends, it's time to start our job. One of the first things we have to do is safely raise and support the front of the vehicle so the wheel's off the ground. After that, we're going to remove our lug nuts. Remove your wheel. With the wheel off of here, the next thing I want to do is remove this bolt for our ABS wire. Now we'll just come up here, get a little bit more slack from the ABS wire. Now we'll follow it up over here. Follow it this way. You should find that it's clipped on the back side of this. Ours isn't actually on there because it's broken. Next thing I want to do is squeeze this little tab right here and separate this. Inspect both areas, make sure that they're in good condition. Now the next thing we'll do is get this out of the way. I'm just going to grab onto this clamp right here. Now we'll grab onto the locking hub, give it a nice wiggle and remove it from the area. Now behind that area you're going to find a snap ring. We need to go ahead and remove that so we can get the washers and spacers out of the way. Now we're going to make our way over to removing the outer tie rod end from the knuckle. Go ahead and remove your cotter pin and then the nut. Now we're going to separate this joint. Obviously our tie rod end boot is in very poor condition and we're going to replace it anyway, but if yours isn't, be careful not to damage it. Now at this point we can turn this so we can access our two caliper bracket bolts. Remove those. I'll leave that in a little bit. Carefully hang your caliper so it's putting no pressure on your flex hose. Remove your rotor. So now we're going to turn the knuckle so we have a clear view of the back side of it. We want to remove all four of our mounting nuts that hold the bearing to the knuckle. Just make sure that you have plenty of slack on your ABS wire. So now we're going to get the bearing off of the knuckle here. To do that, for me, I can just wiggle it around and it's going to come off, but typically that's not the way it's going to be. If you're having an issue, you can just go ahead and take one of your nuts, put it on the back side there onto one of those studs, put it on a couple threads, then take your socket right over it with a nice rubber mallet and give it a bunch of bonks until your bearing comes loose. Now at this point what you're going to want to do is remove the backing plate from the bearing. Ours didn't actually have a backing plate on it, so I'm just going to go ahead and put it on. And we're going to slide this down over the studs. Pay attention to this ear right here. You want to make sure you don't damage your ABS wire. I'm just going to take it, give it a light bend, and we can slide this down and over. Use some red thread locker on all of your studs. Something you want to pay attention to is this area along here. You want to make sure that it's nice and clean and free of any debris. Use some sandpaper or a disc or whatever you need to do. Now let's go ahead and get this onto the truck. Be careful for your ABS wire, make sure it's not going to get a pinch. Now let's turn this and start all four of our nuts. Now let's go ahead and start on all of our nuts and then we'll snug them up and torque them. Once they're all snug, torque them all to 133 foot-pounds. What you're going to notice is where the snap ring is supposed to go on the axle. You want to make sure that that's pushed out this way, out through the bearing. If it doesn't seem like it is far enough, you can use a bar right along the back side and push it through a little further. Right under here. So now let's get this back together. We're going to start with this large one. This one. Both the shims. And then of course our snap ring. Ow. Now I'm just going to go along the edge of that and just make sure it's completely inside the groove. Now let's spray some copper never sees inside this area. Slide in your locking hub. Let's put on our locking clamp. Make sure that it's sitting in the groove all the way around. Now the next thing you're going to want to do is clean up the mating surface on your hub and of course on the back side of the rotor. After you've done that, go ahead and put on a nice coating of copper never seize. Now I'm just going to use an oversized nut and the lug nut to hold the rotor still for me. Now let's get our caliper on here. We'll start in both of our caliper bolts using a little bit of red thread locker, and then we'll snug them up and torque them to 166 foot-pounds. Now let's get our outer tie rod end on here. Once again, I know that my tie rod boot is damaged. I'm going to be replacing this in a future date. So let's go ahead and put our nut on here. We'll snug it up and then we'll torque it to 67 foot-pounds. Take your cotter pin, put it in there, and then pin it over so there's no way the nut can loosen up any further than the cotter pin. Now it's going to be time to run our ABS wire. I'm going to come in between this area, put it into here, right up there. We'll bring it across. We want to make sure we secure it in right here on the frame. Connect this in. Give it a nice tug, make sure it's secured, and then put it on the back side here so it's secure. Now let's get this on here as well. Make sure that can pivot. We'll get the wheel on here, start all of our lug nuts, get it back on the ground, and then we'll torque the lug nuts to 165 foot-pounds. Torqued.